Hello, YouTube, and welcome to another episode of Tomorrow's Talk Today. I'm your host, Will Johnson, and today I'm joined by panelists Jamila, Zariah, and Henry. On today's episode, we'll be discussing the potential issue of China hosting the 2022 Olympics. Particularly, we'll be focusing on China's human rights violations, COVID-19, and the potential dangers for athletes. Our panelists today have all done their homework. They are prepared to discuss these topics accurately and in depth. To begin our discussion, let's take a quick look at a clip detailing China's human rights issues or lack thereof.
Throughout early 2016, the United States, the European Union, and other world powers released a series of joint statements citing growing concern over China's respect for human rights. According to Reuters, the documents accuse the Chinese government of covering up disappearances, censoring opposition, and fostering a biased judicial system, among a slew of other violations. Human rights abuses have reportedly escalated in China since President Xi Jinping took office in 2014. So, what are China's human rights violations? Well, China is an authoritarian state ruled by a one-party system. As such, its government has historically valued state sovereignty over individual rights. In fact, China did...
As you can see from that clip, China certainly has problems regarding human rights. Zariah, why don't you give us your thoughts on China's government and the treatment of the Uyghur population?
Well, clearly it's not a good thing when a human violation is happening, especially from a government that adamantly denies it. But when 250,000 people are being persecuted and put in prison because they are a Muslim group in their country, it's wrong. People have been put in cages awaiting trial. They have been disappearing. And if the rest of the world is noticing this, then clearly, and it's being brought to the stage of the UN of saying this is a human rights violation, I do believe that they need to do more to at least act as they are saying. Because it's already bad enough that we have other governments screaming it from the back of the room, but at least someone needs to do something because people should not be put in cages. That's just my opinion.
I agree. Jamila?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that people should be put in cages, especially just because of something that they believe in. I definitely think bringing this to the Olympics is a smart idea. I know doing my research for this, the Chinese president was upset and said that the U.S. is basically shooting themselves in the foot for bringing politics into the Olympics, but I just feel like this is like a perfect time. Like, everyone's watching. It seems like we all have the same views as the world, and like, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having this platform of the Olympics and the whole world watching is the perfect time to really share this message of that we're not happy with how they're treating people there, and and many other things on top of it. Henry, what are your thoughts?
When it comes to the Uyghur population, the thing we have seen is that we know they're disappearing. We know they're being abused. We know it's an active human rights violation. The White House, Biden's administration has called out on it. That's why we've seen so many Western diplomats boycott this Olympics. However, China feels like nothing's happening. We've seen it when they go light the cauldron. The Uyghur population is like the final stage of the person who lit the cauldron as part of the Uyghur population and went through all their individual classes of economics before it got to that person.
Yeah. We've already started to touch on it a little bit. Politicalization of the Olympics. Jamila, what are your thoughts on this, especially in recent years?
Like I said earlier, I think it's a good idea to bring it to light. I know yesterday I was watching a few videos on YouTube and they were protesting in Turkey, and one of the protesters brought up that although they're boycotting and saying that they're not watching the Olympics, the athletes themselves can do something and advocate. I agree with that to an extent. I know these athletes have been training a lot, and with all the regulations and stuff that they have to follow, it could be a lot, and to just add on top of that politics and stuff, it could be a lot on them.
Yeah, absolutely. Henry?
Just politics in general, when it comes to the Olympic Games, there's always going to be background noise. 2008 for the U.S. coming into the Olympic Games was the recession. Then we have Munich, Germany in the 70s. And then we have 2008 China, which is positive, happiness. And then years change, years go by. Next thing you know, they get a new president who eliminates election terms for himself. is committing genocide. We see all that, but also inside of that is Bob Costas, who works for NBC since like the 90s. At the 90s Olympics, made the statement of, "Here comes China, the new C bloc," referring to the new communist bloc. And NBC said, "Are you going to say I'm sorry for that? Are you going to?" And he said, "No, I'm not." NBC released a statement, and then he said he wasn't going to apologize for it because people knew it was true. And Bob Costas, when they did 2008, was aware of the power of China politically.
Soraya?
I do believe that politics is always going to embed itself into something like the Olympics when so many countries are blended together for watching all these athletes play. Even though I don't think people want it to, because they expect that they're going to be watching a bunch of athletes do sports at their greatness. But the only issue is they aren't looking at the whole seriousness of an issue. If countries has political issues going on, those political issues are going to be brought into the games because it's the whole country being represented at that point. And this is a great time for it to be put on the screen, for people to, even though they don't know what the issue might be, at least they might be aware that some issue is going on, and that's always important.
Exactly. I think we've touched it all pretty well. I think that, you know, the Olympics are just such a good platform. You have to use it to get that message out some way, and I think America is doing a good job of that right now. You know, but I think we can all do a better job, obviously, and you know, hoping going forward that things change out there. So, thank you all for bringing up some intriguing points about China and globalization and the politicalization of the Olympics. We have to take a quick break, but we'll be right back. So stay tuned.
Longwood University and Farmville, Virginia. Rebound to Phillips. Great, strong rebound by Rudy Phillips. Then Jordan Hickman with the mid-range jumper goes down off the backboard.
So the sports committee within WMLU is an award-winning committee in itself, and it's an opportunity for people to be able to call Division I athletic events. Basketball, we've done soccer, we've done softball for the first time last year. This year we're doing tennis for the first time, which I'm excited about, as well as baseball in the mix as well. So it's an opportunity for people to get on-air experience, learn who they are as a play-by-play, on-air talent. And there's a lot of different things that kind of come with that.
All right, so with WMLU Sports, there's always 3 people working a game. So usually there'll either be 2 people calling the game, color and play-by-play, and then there'll be 1 person in the studio working the soundboard right here. The soundboard is to make sure that the guys or girls at that game are sounding good. They can hear them over the air or the web stream. If there's any problems, the person in the studio is able to adapt and adjust and make sure that everything here is working well.
I'm a proud Longwood graduate, class of 2011, and there is no way I would be here if it weren't for my time behind the mic at WMLU, the music of Longwood University and the award-winning home of your Longwood Lancers.
So this is an opportunity to grow, learn, figure out what works best for you, what skills you have, what makes you a good on-air talent, good play-by-play person. But it's also, of course, an opportunity to just meet new people with similar interests. Inherently, if you're joining the sports committee, you probably like sports. And then everybody else in the room does too. So it's an opportunity to grow, make new friends, and have that commonality between other individuals.
11:44 left in the second half, which brings us to our under 12-minute media timeout. So we'll come back with Harper Baker at the chair.
Shout out to the WMLU Sports Committee there. So welcome back. Next we are going to be focusing particularly on China hosting the Olympics during the COVID-19 pandemic. With the bubble being created to prevent a potential outbreak, Henry, what are your thoughts on China's approach to COVID-19?
Well, Will, as you know, when it comes to a bubble, we've seen it with the NBA, we've seen it work with the NHL, and now we're seeing it work with the Olympics. The Olympics has hunkered down, tightened up, and went with a zero COVID policy, and that is disinfecting every area they touch. Even when they get out of like their vehicles or vans, when they're getting transported to an event, the ground is sprayed. Like, I mean, it's crazy. You're outside, but it's getting sprayed, and then you got robots cooking your food, making your drinks. I mean, no human contact whatsoever. Plexiglass at each cafeteria table. What else? You got security guards moving the gates left and right. It's all zero COVID protocol. China wants this disease not to interfere with their games. So far, we've seen none of the events have been postponed. We've also seen that Canada and Russia play with masks, play women's hockey until their test results sort of came back. Like there was a possible positive outbreak.
Yeah, I think that, thank you, Henry. Those things are all great ideas. And, I've seen Shaun White talk about a lot of this on TikTok. He's been posting, and it's really cool to see like how they get food and everything. They got robots giving us. It's just really weird, but it works, and they've obviously done it. So thank you, Henry. I believe we actually have a clip from PBS News reporting on the bubble.
The Beijing Winter Olympics officially begin today, the second games during the pandemic, and hosted by the country where coronavirus originated. China's hardline policy on containing the virus has included vast lockdowns of millions and severe restrictions for its citizens. Nick Schifrin reports on an Olympics in the era of COVID and how measures designed to keep athletes safe are also silencing Beijing's critics.
For the 2022 Winter Games, the Olympic mascot might just be a man in a hazmat suit. Beijing airport staff greet all athletes covered head to toe and administer athletes' third COVID test in 5 days before they can even arrive at the ultimate sporting test.
It's called the closed loop, and we really actually do hope it's fully closed.
Joanne Firestall-Reed and Deirdre Irwin are biathletes, a combination of cross-country skiing and shooting. Before they left, they embraced China's COVID restrictions known as the closed loop.
What are your thoughts on China's treatment of COVID-19 so far?
I definitely think all the steps that they have taken are very necessary. I know from the research that I did, a lot of the athletes and reporters were tested prior. All those citizens in China were also tested. They actually built a community basically to close off just to keep COVID out. As we saw from that clip, they were building fences and gates and all of that stuff. So I definitely think they are not playing when it comes to COVID. I know one of the videos I watched talked about how how they're tracking the athletes and all that, but if they find out that you purchased cold medicine just for a simple head cold or cough drops or something, you're going to get a notification that you need to go get tested right away. So they're definitely putting their foot down.
Yeah, absolutely. Zariah?
I do think personally that it saddens me that we're in a time where this has to happen, because another aspect of the Olympics was everyone getting together behind the scenes. And we don't get those videos anymore because there's a lack of interaction. You don't see them going off to the museums together or anything like that. But overall, I do think in times like this, with COVID, China's really hunkered down on it. They said, no, we're not letting this interfere with our games. And I really would appreciate if none of the athletes get sick because they worked their whole life to get to this point.
Henry, any more thoughts on this?
I think going off your point, Zariah, it is sad. We don't get to see those background scenes and all that stuff. We don't get to see them go out. We don't get to see the personal interaction. We don't get to see the emotional reaction from the parents who are there. Now it's over Zoom. It's far away. It's spread out. Today's Show loved going to the Olympics and going inside the village and looking at their life and where everything happens. And now it's just sort of separate and socially distanced and sort of a little depressing.
Yeah, I think it definitely gives a sort of, closed off feeling and just a less personal feeling this year than other years, just because of that lack of access, especially into those personal lives, and you can get stories from people inside the bubble. Like I said, Shaun White's still doing stuff. So there are some ways to get this personal thing, but it's hard, especially with this. And just think of the devastation that COVID can cause, especially for athletes. You train 4 years or more to come to these games, and if you get COVID, you can't compete. It's just an awful thing, and I feel for those people who, have already tested positive and things like that, and it's not great. But I'm glad that we're pushing through and making it work, because this is a important thing for our country and for the world. So thank you all for your points there. There's certainly a lot to unravel here. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more to discuss on China and the Olympics here on Tomorrow's Talk Today.
The Communication Studies Department has always prided itself on having our students do original research. And in the fall of 2018, when I was teaching that class, I wanted to look for a way to have our students present that research in a different manner. And I did a little research, and I could not find anyone else who had live streamed original undergraduate research. So I kind of came up with the idea to have the students present it, and Dr. Paul was very agreeable here. And so rather than doing a traditional poster session or something like that, we came up with the idea to have our students present their research in front of the camera. And the cool thing about that is the distribution is much wider than it would be typically. Parents, alumni, friends of the department all got to watch that research, and the students also had something that's more lasting that they could look at later in life than a traditional poster format.
So one of the ultimate aims of doing research is that you get to share it with somebody, and that it's just not for yourselves or just to have some sort of document. It's to be able to disseminate that research, whether you have significant findings or not. And so being able to have an audience for your research project is paramount. And having an opportunity to live stream it gives students an awesome opportunity to be able to share it with a large audience.
So being in the studio, there's just nothing like that. It's the whole overall experience. You got the cameras, the lights, everything in front of you, being on the stage, and all the information's there, and you have one take to get that information out as efficiently as you can, compared to having a poster session where people come and go as they please, and you're just set at one spot for X amount of time. So being in the studio, it's just a great experience, nothing like it.
All right, thanks for sticking with us, folks. To end our discussion today, let's take a quick look at a clip from CBS News about a required app at the Olympics.
How much data could be put at risk just by downloading an app? Well, depending on the app, it could threaten everything on your phone, even other apps. This could pose a real problem for Olympians. In order to participate in Beijing, the Chinese government is requiring everyone to download an app called My 2022. Athletes, journalists, spectators, everyone there must put this app on their phones. Don't search for it. Don't download it. Out of curiosity, because the watchdog group Citizen Lab has a warning for anyone who does. The group says that encrypted products could be sidestepped. Quote, health customs forms which transmit passport details, demographic information, and medical and travel history are also vulnerable, unquote. Now, the International Olympic Committee pushed back on these findings. It says that 2 independent cybersecurity companies vetted this app. That's not stopping other countries from telling their athletes to use disposable phones or burner phones.
Don't search for it. Don't download it. Potential spyware for athletes and journalists worldwide is very serious, as you can tell by my comment there. Jamila, let's start with your thoughts.
Yeah, so I understand why they are enforcing this My 2022 app, just to keep up with like all the athletes and how they're feeling health-wise. But it is an invasion of privacy, and I know that China implemented these cybersecurity laws, but at the end of the day, they're also saying, well, if the government is questioning you, you need to turn over your phone. So like, how effective are those cybersecurity laws? So I understand why these athletes are being advised to bring burner phones. I personally would probably bring a burner phone.
As would I. Henry?
I'd definitely bring like a burner phone, a burner laptop. Definitely be advised. Like you have the FBI telling you, better bring a burner phone stuff. I mean, if you're going to communicate with somebody. But we also have seen them use Zoom to communicate back home. We've also seen them use TikTok to show us inside the bubble life. That's important as well. But yeah, technology in China and athletes is sort of a confusing point on what do I do once I get there. It must be interesting being an athlete and using technology in a country like China.
Yeah, especially, being able to have access to the sites that the rest of, the Chinese country in itself, it does not have access to. Like, you're still able to use Twitter and TikTok, and well, I think you can use TikTok in China. I don't really know, but like these sort of things, like these apps, Facebook, that people in China can't use, but they have special VPNs that you can be able to use it like that. Obviously, you have to use their VPN, and if you don't, you can get arrested. And it's crazy. And if you try to break anything outside of their rules, it can get really dicey. So as an athlete, you definitely really have to be careful with how you proceed, especially on social media with what you're saying. And before you even get there, China already knows your stance on them. Like have tracked you down and searched through your history and decide, like they've split you into a group of Chinese supporters and those who have spoken out against China, and you're separated already. So those who have spoken out against, have an even more watchful eye on them. So Zariah, why don't you round us off? What are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are China has a habit of going beyond what they actually need to do. If everyone is saying this is not a good thing, if you need a burner phone, that already tells me enough of what I need to know, what they're probably looking for. Because if they're taking your passport information, your location, those are not things that they should be taking in if they're just trying to see if you're sick. So what are they going to do with that information if they have it? So burner phones, use them. You got them.
Yeah. All right. So we've discussed a lot about China and the Olympics today. Now let's get everybody's thoughts on whether or not China should be hosting the Olympics this year. Let's start with you, Jamila.
So yesterday, again, when I was doing research, a lot of people were saying that China doesn't deserve to host the Olympics just because of all the human rights issues. And to an extent, I do agree, but at the same time, I feel like this is a good thing that they are hosting because it can bring light to these human rights issues. I know me personally, and this probably will sound like a bad thing, but I really didn't know about it until the Olympics and all of this stuff started happening. So for people like me, I think it is a good thing that they are hosting it.
All right, Zariah?
I think it is a good thing that they are benefiting from this. So no, I do not think China should have hosted the Olympics. I do think a big thing could have happened had they been skipped over, and I think that would have been a broad of awareness because people would have been like, why did China get skipped? What happened there? And I just think the committee should have done more when thinking about this because human rights issues is something that you don't want tied to the Olympics. The Olympics is supposed to be like a happy time. But overall, no, they should not have hosted this year.
Henry, what do you think about this? Do you think it's even safe for the athletes to be there?
I think overall, for the athletes to be there, it's a personal choice. Like, you've worked so hard, you've dedicated yourself. We've seen in ice skating, somebody finally get a gold medal after all that hard work. So, I mean, we're seeing a lot of people make the podium, but we're also seeing the U.S. struggle, I think, in the standings. So I think overall, athlete-wise, it's a personal choice. We're seeing Michaela Schiffer struggle as well, but that's just due to emotional outside reasons. We're seeing just a lot of stress and intensity on the athletes being there in China and being isolated from family and small amounts of fans in the stands. So, I mean, if I'm an athlete, there's a lot of pros and cons there, but if I'm in their shoes, I think if I have like a major brand and I'm representing something, I wouldn't go.
Yeah, I think that China has done a decent job at trying to make sure everyone is, safe and feeling safe and or trying their best in the way they know how. So I think it's safe for them to go, and obviously I want them to compete. It's difficult with all these issues that are going on around in the world, and especially in China, that I don't think they should be hosting right now, especially just with all of the controversy with human rights issues as well. It's just the way they've been handling things in their country in general. So, it's a hard call, but training for 4 years and being able to compete and win that gold medal is a feeling like no other. So, obviously, I want the athletes to go and do what they, have trained to do. So, we discussed a lot about China and the Olympics today. Thank you all for joining us so much. My name is Will Johnson. This has been Tomorrow's Talk Today. Have a great rest of your day.
you.